It is widely known that in the Bible, Cain committed the act of killing his brother Abel. However, if you are curious about the reasons, methods, or consequences of Cain's actions, the book of Genesis does not provide explicit answers. But fear not, there are explanations to be found. Here is what you may not have been told about Cain and Abel. Cain, the first recorded murderer in history, is often cited as an example of the depths of human depravity. In fact, according to the apocryphal book of Bartholomew, when Jesus' spirit descended into hell to rescue the deceased and bring them to heaven on the day after his resurrection, only 3 individuals were deemed so wicked that they were left behind: Judas, Herod, and Cain. According to Jewish legend, Cain's inclination towards evil may have been inherent in his very nature. The story suggests that Cain was not Adam's biological son, but rather the offspring of Satan. The legend of the Jews, as told by Louis Ginzberg, recounts that the fallen angel Samael, also known as the Great Satan, appeared to Eve in the form of a serpent. One can imagine the kind of mischief that the second human being and a fallen angel in the form of a snake might engage in. 9 months later, Eve gave birth to a radiant baby who immediately stood up, ran away, and returned with a straw for his mother. The central story of Cain and Abel revolves around the fact that both brothers made individual sacrifices to God. God favored Abel's offering, causing Cain to become envious and ultimately leading him to kill his brother. However, a significant unanswered question surrounding this incident pertains to why Cain's offering was rejected while Abel's was accepted. The most apparent difference between the 2 sacrifices lies in the fact that Cain, a farmer, offered the produce of his fields, while Abel, a herdsman, presented the firstborn of his flock. Consequently, one could reasonably conclude that God preferred Abel's blood sacrifice and disapproved of Cain's grain offering. However, the matter may not be that straightforward. Temple Judaism did not establish a hierarchy of offerings, and the intent behind the offering was considered more important than its material value. Rabbinical literature suggests that Cain erred by offering inferior portions of his crops while keeping the best for himself out of greed. In contrast, Abel offered his first and finest produce. Furthermore, God did not disregard Cain's offering per se, but rather Cain himself and his offering. This indicates that the issue lay with Cain's attitude when presenting his fruits to God. The priestly guidelines in the Bible for making an offering support the notion that an attitude of faith and submission is crucial. It is worth noting that the theme of someone trying to escape their destiny only to fulfill it is a common motif in ancient literature. A notable example is Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex, which focuses on the struggle to evade a prophecy that the infant Oedipus would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. Paradoxically, this very struggle leads him to fulfill the prophecy by committing those acts. Likewise, the tragedy of Cain murdering his brother Abel follows a similar pattern, at least according to texts outside the main biblical canon. According to an apocryphal Jewish text known as the Life of Adam and Eve, dating back to the 1st century CE, Eve had a disturbing dream after Abel's birth. In the dream, she witnessed Cain with blood-stained hands, which turned out to be the blood of his brother Abel. To make matters worse, Cain was depicted as drinking Abel's blood, resembling a vampire from an Anne Rice novel. Eve, horrified by her dream, confided in Adam, believing it to be a premonition. Adam, considering the dream's significance, suggested that keeping the brothers apart would prevent one from harming the other. However, this decision had unintended consequences. Raising one son as a farmer and the other as a shepherd seemed like a reasonable plan, but things took a dark turn. To establish Cain's guilt in the murder, means, motive, and opportunity needed to be established, as is often the case in serious crimes. While the motive behind Cain's actions may seem obvious, jealousy over God favoring Abel's offering and rejecting his own, the biblical account in Genesis does not explicitly state this. Throughout history, various interpretations have emerged. Rabbinical literature offers alternative motivations for Cain's violent act. According to these sources, Cain and Abel divided their inheritance from Adam, with Cain receiving the land and Abel receiving everything else. This created jealousy between them. Some sources even suggest that they both had feelings for their mother, Eve, and fought for her attention. Another theory is that Cain was upset because Abel was going to marry a more attractive sister. Additionally, they may have argued over whose domain would house the future temple. The Talmud proposes that Abel displayed no sympathy for Cain's dejection and triggered his anger in that way. Regarding the means of death, the book of Genesis provides no details, simply stating that Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. However, apocryphal literature offers possible explanations. These include suffocating Abel and then decapitating him with a donkey's jawbone, slashing him with a farm implement, biting off his head, or repeatedly punching him until he died. The most common explanation involves Cain using a jawbone, but the Book of Jubilees, recognized in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, offers a simpler account where Cain strikes Abel on the head with a rock. Simple, clean, and believable. Jubilees also adds poetic justice to Cain's story. Cain meets his demise when his house collapses, crushing him with its stones, mirroring the way he crushed his brother. As the saying goes, he who lives by the stone will die by the stone. After killing his brother, Cain's story continues in the Hebrew Scriptures. In Genesis 4 verse 11, God curses Cain to a life of unproductive toil and wandering. Cain fears that anyone who encounters him will seek to harm him, although it seems peculiar considering the limited population on earth at the time, consisting only of his parents. Nevertheless, God marks Cain to protect him, declaring that anyone who harms him will face sevenfold vengeance. The meaning of the mark of Cain is ambiguous, and interpretations vary. Some suggest that Cain was afflicted with leprosy, sprouted a horn on his forehead, or had the sacred name of God inscribed on his arm and forehead as a protective symbol. Another theory suggests that God gave him a dog as protection, which could also be seen as a curse as dogs are not positively referenced in the Hebrew Bible. Unfortunately, the worst and most harmful interpretation has been that the mark of Cain represented dark skin, a notion that was used to justify slavery and racism well into the 20th century. According to the book of Genesis, after God cursed Cain, he left the presence of the Lord and settled in a place east of the Garden of Eden called Nod, meaning wandering. There, he built what is presumed to be the world's first city. This is the last mention of Cain in the biblical canon. However, the Jewish historian Josephus, in his work Antiquities, provides additional details about the further adventures of Cain. Contrary to repenting for his crime and seeking a peaceful life after being spared God's wrath, Cain embraces his wickedness and becomes an innovator of evil. Josephus states that Cain dedicated himself to pursuing pleasure and wealth at any cost, resorting to theft and violence against his neighbors. He amasses great wealth through theft, builds a strong army, and encourages his friends to do the same. This enables him to lead a formidable army himself. Cain is also credited with inventing weights and measures, which may seem positive at first glance, but he uses them to ensure that no one is accidentally generous by giving too much. He also invents the concept of property lines and fortifications to protect one's belongings with violence. A common question that arises when considering the biblical account of creation is how the whole world could be populated with only 4 people, 3 of whom are men, all of them related, and 1 of them deceased. Even if we only examine canonical sources, we know that Adam and Eve had another child named Seth after Abel's death. Seth becomes the continuation of Adam's family line, leading to Noah, David, and ultimately the Messiah, Jesus, for Christians. Seth, as the counterpoint to his brother Cain, symbolizes good, just as Cain represents evil. Seth becomes the figurehead of a line of Christian sects known as the Sethian Gnostics, who view him as the mediator of divine wisdom to mankind. However, the question of female companionship arises. It is believed that Cain was born with a twin sister, and Abel was a triplet with two sisters, although the Bible does not mention them. Each brother was intended to marry his twin, and while this may seem unusual, God granted them special dispensation. So, Cain had a wife, and they had a son named Enoch, after whom Cain named his great city. The identity of Cain's wife is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible. Some believe that God created other people who were not born from Adam and Eve, and Cain encountered these individuals. Others think that Cain's wife must have been one of the other sons and daughters of Adam and Eve mentioned in Genesis chapter 5. Some sources, including the Book of Jubilees, suggest that Cain's wife was his sister Awan, while Abel's wife was their sister Asherah, who later married Seth after Abel's murder. The descendants of Cain were known for their wickedness, following in their father's footsteps. Josephus states that even within Adam's lifetime, the lineage of Cain became increasingly corrupt, with each generation more evil than the last. However, they are also credited with significant innovations. Cain's descendant Lamech is said to have invented polygamy. Jubal invented music instruments such as the lyre and pipe, and Tubal-Cain excelled in metalworking and warfare. Although Abel does not appear again in the Hebrew scriptures after his death in Genesis, he is mentioned a couple of times in the New Testament. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus compares himself to Abel, referring to him as the first martyr whose righteous blood would be upon the heads of those persecuting the Son of God. The Epistle to the Hebrews contrasts Jesus' sacrificial death, bringing mercy, with Abel's blood, which cried out for vengeance from the earth. In the book of Enoch, not to be confused with Cain's son Enoch, Abel is depicted as the chief spirit among the martyrs, crying out for vengeance against the descendants of Cain. The book describes Enoch's journey through the afterlife, where he encounters the righteous who prospered, the righteous who suffered, the wicked who prospered, and the wicked who suffered. Abel is recognized as the chief spirit among the martyrs seeking retribution against the lineage of Cain. Thank you for watching. We hope you have gained insights into the Bible through this discussion. Please consider subscribing and clicking on the notification icon for future updates. Stay tuned for more episodes where we delve into critical issues found in the Bible.